Hi guys, this is Frontman and today we bring to you an excellent geopolitical story of how President Putin has come out victorious without firing a single bullet. Let me give you an insight on the Ukraine crisis, which has been dominating the geopolitics since 3 months, taking the world to the edge of a possible third world war. Ready? Let's get started. Ukraine is one of the biggest countries in Europe on territorial basis with 41 million highly educated people strongly motivated to work. But that's not all. Let us see how Ukraine stands in the rankings. Ukraine is 4th in the world in total value of natural resources, 1st in Europe in recoverable reserves of uranium ores, 10th in world in titanium ore reserves, 2nd largest iron ore reserves in the world, and 3rd in Europe in shale gas reserves, 7th in world in coal reserves. Enough for Putin to set an eye on Ukraine? That's not all. Ukraine is an agricultural country too. 3rd in world by the area of black soil, 1st in world in exports of sunflower oil, 9th place in world in production of chicken eggs, 4th largest exporter of corn in the world, 8th in the world in wheat exports, and the list is endless. Ukraine can meet the food needs of 600 million people across the world. Can you imagine what boost it can give to the Russian economy? Now, Ukraine is highly industrialized too. 1st in Europe in ammonia production, it has the 4th largest natural gas pipeline system in the world, and it has the 4th largest exporter of turbines for nuclear power plants in the world, 9th in the world in defense industry products, and with 32.4 million tons, it is the 10th largest steel producer in the world. That's Ukraine, Putin's passion. So how did Putin play this game? It all started with Putin fueling civil protests in the regions of Donetsk People's Republic (DPR) and Luhansk People's Republic (LPR) in 2013. Huge demand played up in these regions, especially in Donbass, to join Russia by breaking away from Ukraine. Ukrainian government made the biggest mistake of using force against peaceful protesters, and that is exactly what Mr. Putin wanted. Criticizing the suppression of citizens' freedom, he struck unexpectedly. The answer? Crimea. Putin got Crimea annexed to Russia on 20th of 2014, leaving Ukraine, US and the EU in shock. As is the case every time, the US, NATO and the EU staged strong protests against annexation of Crimea. Strong sanctions were imposed on Russia. Putin did not budge. Instead, his agencies intensified the civil protests in these regions. Finally, Ukraine had to come down to the negotiations table. After extensive talks in Minsk, Belarus, an agreement to end the war in Donbass was signed by the representatives of the Trilateral Contact Group comprising of Russia, Ukraine and EU, without recognition of any status by the heads of DPR and LPR. The mediation was of course done by Germany and France. Now read deep into this. Mr. Putin got DPR and LPR signatories to the Minsk agreement in spite of they being in Ukraine, thereby making Ukraine and EU agree to the fact that these are not integrated parts of Ukraine. Now, since 2021, Putin has again activated his groups in these regions to start civil war to break away from Ukraine. But this time, he has also deployed around 1.3 lakh strong military on the borders of Ukraine and Belarus under the pretext of military drills. Ukraine wants to become a member of NATO, and Putin used this exact reason to mount military pressure, saying NATO accepting Ukraine as a member would be a red line. US and NATO got in panic mode and started flexing muscles. Did it deter Putin? Absolutely not. Hectic rounds of talks started between US, NATO and Russia. Putin continued with his tough stand that Ukraine must follow the Minsk agreement and that NATO must not admit Ukraine as a member. Slowly, cracks started developing among the NATO allies, with France and Germany taking a stand against NATO. So what was exactly happening among the NATO allies? Why was the US pressing so much for their sanctions against Russia, using Ukraine crisis as a reason for it? For this, you need to understand the European Union's position with respect to gas supply. Natural gas by the numbers. Russia exports 23.3 billion cubic feet per day, which is 72% of Europe's requirement. US exports 9.6 billion cubic feet per day. Russian gas costs around $270 per 1000 cubic feet, whereas the US gas costs around $1000 plus per 1000 cubic feet. In short, the US does not produce enough natural gas anywhere close to fill the gap left by Russia, and also sells almost at 4 times higher than the Russian gas. Europe, which is already in the midst of an energy crisis, the consequences of our sanctions on Russia would be catastrophic. So US pressing for sanctions on Russia on the pretext of Ukraine is understandable. But couldn't the EU member countries of NATO see this? Why were they still falling in the US trap? The answer to this is the lobby led by communist George Soros, the arms, oil and pharma lobby of the US, which wants to control the entire world. This lobby wants to push the world into a war since 4 years, which was not allowed by Trump. But now, US President Biden is just a puppet in these hands. In fact, every US president was, except Trump. But Putin is smart. He used EU's dependence on Russian gas to his advantage. Germany kept doing flip-flop over the sanctions proposed by Biden, so did France to isolate UK. Rest NATO members were forced to sit like sitting ducks watching these developments and frustration of Biden, who was trying to level his best into the war against Russia. Finally, Germany and France put their best foot forward to declare that Ukraine can't be made a member of the NATO. This was the last straw on the camel's back. President Biden has to declare that sending of troops to Ukraine is not possible. UK and other NATO allies had to follow suit and declare that they will only sell military requirements to Ukraine but won't be sending ground troops to Ukraine. In short, Ukraine was isolated and it has realized that it has to fight this war entirely on its own, which was obviously impossible against the mighty Russia. Still, Biden was trying to threaten Germany and France with the possibility of Russia invading Ukraine by declaring various dates of Russian attack. And then came the masterstroke by Putin. He silently started withdrawing the Russian troops from the Ukrainian border and Belarus as well. No one could believe it. In fact, Biden still tried to hold on, saying he does not believe in this Russian withdrawal. Putin was smiling, in fact, all this time. What Mr. Biden did not realize was that Putin never wanted to attack Ukraine. That was not the plan at all. Then what was the plan? To test waters with NATO. Perfectly done. The result? Well, number 1, US and NATO became a laughing stock. Number 2, it was again proved that US and NATO are not trustworthy allies. Number 3, cracks in the NATO split wide open. Number 4, this has opened the doors to Russian troops in Cuba and Venezuela. I mean, backyard of US. Most importantly, number 5, Putin opened the doors for Nord Stream 2 project with Germany, which was stalled by US since 2020 on the pretext of sanctions against Russia. This, boys and girls, is the crux of Ukraine conflict. Target was always Germany. Ukraine to bahana tha. In short, without firing a single shot, Putin exposed the impotence and lack of decision making of US as well as NATO. Now, what about China? Lol, you think that Putin would care for China once he gets hold of this developed Ukraine? I'm not a fool to have given you the full details of the Ukrainian economy right at the start of the video. So has Ukraine survived? Nah, don't even think of that. Like we all are seeing, Ukraine has to fall. What I have explained was only part 1. Part 2, you already know. So what side would India choose, Russia or the US? None. Why would we choose any side? They both need India. We are at the center and the central pole does not shift. India is rightly building a third axis, another axis with Israel, UAE, Greece and Saudi. Man, I love geopolitics for all the games that we get to see. Lastly, there are some topics that we could not cover extensively in this video. The Nord Stream project, the Crimea, etc. So please do let me know in the comment section if you are interested, and we shall be back with more interesting videos on them. And before we part, do not forget to subscribe to this channel for more informative videos like this. Until next time, stay awesome, signing off.